Welcome. This is Learn and Do for March 10th, 2024. And so let me share my screen. I realized I didn't get to, well, yesterday I felt really proud of myself. I got the HackMD started before the meeting. And you might wonder why we want to do HackMD. I think we just do. So let's start that. Learn and Do with Peter. So I learned yesterday that it's good to put notes in the title there. So then when it goes into the website, it's already named the right thing. Okay. As you all know, this is a note-taking thing that I use, and people can either type on this or read or watch it or not at all. But then we have some notes, and we can refer to them during the meeting, and then they can get saved to the website. I'm looking for my chat. Oops. Okay. A good number of you were here yesterday. And it turned out what we mostly covered was why or why not we would, actually, let me look at this is why, I don't know, this is why notes are good. So here's the page on the website. Let me do that a little bit more slowly. I happen to have bookmarked this this website. Let me go home. Put that in the chat. So the way this website works, on the home page, I keep a list of all of our session pages, all of our sessions. And then if you go to a session page, there's a YouTube link for the recording, the next and previous meetings, so I can go back in time, which I'm pretty proud about. That's pretty cool. And then the stuff below here is from Zoom. Zoom has we turned on AI summary. This is what it outputs. It does a quick recap and then a more detailed summary of things. And then where I was really going to, because I got here, was, oh, this link is broken. Let me do that again. Okay, so then the HackMD we had yesterday is this, which has got a beautiful set of notes and stuff. And now during the meeting, we could edit this. After the meeting, I moved it over to this web page. Now we can't edit it. I actually, anybody who can edit the website could edit it. So that's me right now. Let me know offline if you ever want to edit this website, because I'll set you up to do it. So it turned out the thing that we ended up doing most was talking about whether or not it made sense to write our own alternative front end for ChatGPT and stuff like that. And we ended the session getting a broken version of it written. Turns out you can go to ChatGPT and say, write me a thing that does this in Python, and then it'll do it. You actually don't need to write any Python code yourself. It just does it. But what we learned yesterday is that you need to take responsibility for finding and fixing bugs and stuff like that. So in the 20 minutes or so before this meeting, what I did is fix the prompt. Actually, it ended up being the prompt that was a problem. And we've got a working version of Sylph 2, and now it's called Salamander. And let me demo that real quick. It's using.
So Peter, can I ask a question? Do the other people that weren't on the call today, yesterday, do they understand what we're doing?
Maybe not. I'm going to try to keep this section short enough to kind of like say, here we are, and then we'll talk about where to go from there. So Salamander uses something called the command line, which is a different way to use your computer. You type things at it, like I can list the files in this directory, or I can run a command like Salamander, or actually I can look at this text file called Salamander. This is the whole program that can send a prompt to the back end of ChatGPT and get an answer. So, and the way I would do that, I won't even do it because it takes a minute for OpenAI to reply. But I created a text file with a prompt in it, and then to run Salamander, you go Salamander, use this for input, the Silk Road text file, and then I can optionally say and output it to out.txt or whatever. I did that, and this is what we got back. I did this, in the few minutes before this call. So you can see this is an interesting question, and this is a great answer. You can also see that if I were to ask this in the chat GPT web interface, this would say U: in front of it, and this would say ChatGPT: in front of it. So you can see that it's a little bit different. It's also in two places. It's in two separate files. The thing that I don't want to do that we did yesterday is take a lot of time talking about stuff. So if it's interesting to people, if we have questions about any of this, I'd love to talk about it, but I'll kind of keep going. To keep this interesting for the folks that are here, I think it's useful to do this exercise with folks from AI 101, but it's not going to be interesting and useful for everybody. So let me go back to our HackMD page. Oops. So what we just did, let's catch up from yesterday. P demos Salamander. And now, so then I'm going to make a new section here called topics to consider. We could keep going on building Salamander. We could dive deeper on where Salamander is right now. Or we could do something different and completely different and interesting. I would probably pick generating images with Midjourney and maybe a little bit of Dolly. And especially explore, I think it's it's called it the Kaminsky method of prompting. But we could do anything. We could also do style ref or compare and contrast Dolly and Midjourney. We could do this, I could do it kind of in show and tell mode, or we could do this as a jam a little bit, and we could all do images or prompts or whatever. Okay, so the big differences or the big alternatives here are keep going with writing an LLM front end in Python, or do something completely different because we want to put that aside for a little bit and keep going. Or sorry, do something different, images. What do we feel like, folks?
I think I'm going to defer to the people that were here yesterday. since they may want some continuity. So I'm flexible either way.
Sounds good.
I was here yesterday and I'm flexible.
Same, I'm flexible.
Me too, whichever way you want to go.
Okay. Let's do, I was thinking about the structure. Let's actually do both, maybe. Since people aren't sick and tired of Python and writing Python code to generate LLMs, let's do this a little bit more, and maybe do that for a half hour, and then we'll switch the last half of the call. We can do image fun. So as you might remember, yesterday we ended up with, so let me talk a little bit more about Salamander, where we are right now, and then keep going a little bit. I can probably show you the questions. Here's where we ended yesterday's call. This is a quick prompt to write our front end. I used a standard set of instructions. Let's see, standard set of instructions is here. This was actually the thing that made it talk to the GPT-4 API. And this worked great. It made a nice program for us, and we ran it, and we got this error, 401 client error, unauthorized for URL. So I was a little bit surprised by what this, and then we ended the call because we ran out of time. Jeannie asked a really great question right at the end of the call. You have to have an API key, like a code string, to use an API. And do you ever need to switch it? Do you need to upgrade it? It turns out that I underspecified this. I said interface with a GPT-4 API. And ChatGPT in its infinite wisdom picked the old version of this. This is the old version. There's a slightly new version. You know, I don't know, because they're moving fast and kind of breaking things. They left this one around so that if people were using it, they had code written and were still using it, your code continued to work, but they moved. You use a slightly different endpoint, it's called, to do the new stuff. And so we got this thing. It says you're using the wrong API key, and that really confused me because, and I check later. I'm using a valid API key, so you know what's the problem? By the way, we came over and said this is a classic thing to do when you're doing stuff with ChatGPT and a third party like a programming language. Hey, and you can just say this. You don't have to say, I think what's wrong is, you know, you just say, I got blah. And ChatGPT is pretty good at going, here's what I think the problem is, or what the problem might be, and here's how to solve it. It's great at this. So it turned out that, and this really surprised me, if you have a new API key, this is the error you get for the old endpoint. They won't let you use the old endpoint if you don't have an old API key. That's not really normal. It kind of makes sense, but it's very surprising. So all I had to do was, quote unquote, all I had to do was go here and it turns out this is the right way to do it. It has this little word chat in here, and it's got a slightly different, signature. It's called slightly different way of calling it. So Jeannie's question was spot on and was right in the crux of fixing the problem. So I came back and told it much more, with much more specificity, use this one. And then I also looked up what model to use. We can talk about model names. I'm not really happy with their model names. It's okay, but kind of confusing. And then this worked, except there was a small problem. I didn't tell it to take my API key the usual way to do it. And this is a fine thing for it to kind of figure that I should do, but I didn't want that. So I said, get the API key from the environment variable. And so this is the current version of Salamander. So it completely rewrote the whole script. And then I use this one instead of the slightly immediately previous one, and we're good to go. So that's where we are. One of my lessons was to listen to Jeannie a little bit more thoughtfully and go, I wonder if that's the problem. By the way, Claire, I loved your illustrations you were doing during the call yesterday. It made me think. Claire was doing these cool things, which were, you taking some of the metaphors I used and turning them into images. You know that thing where people do graphic facilitation? They're drawing stuff on a whiteboard while people are, or on paper maybe, while a meeting is going on, so you can kind of illustrate the meeting. Claire, I think you have a second career maybe being a graphics facilitator with image generator, and maybe we all do. Maybe we'll get rich off of our LLM front end and get to retire and just do image generation for meetings. Okay, so a couple of the next steps. So let's pretend Salamander is a software product that we're making, and we're a little startup. So one of the, I went through it kind of quick, but you can see that it's a clunky interface, we'll call it. I create a text file, and then I tell it that to use that text file, and then I get an output file. So there's two things that's clunky about that. One of them is that it's text files, and maybe another clunky thing is that it's the terminal window. The more important thing actually is that it's one turn of the conversation. So I got to ask a question and I got a great response. But if I want to ask another question in that same conversation, we don't have that set up yet. So let me demonstrate that real quick. So here's its answer, right? And let's take a topic from, in usual ChatGPT Plus, I would say, tell me more about monetary exchange and banking. And if I make a new, I'm going to make a new text file called monetary. And so tell me more about monetary exchange and banking. The good thing and bad thing here is if I salamander this, and I'll write it to out2.txt. If I salamander that, and let's look at sorry, yeah, there you go. I was going to kind of try to do some pattern while it was. Another thing you'll notice is we didn't get to see it doing the printing text thing, which we'll come back to. So let's see what it said. So this is actually, maybe I picked a bad example, but you can imagine this doesn't have any Silk Road context. It's just a new, question and answer. If I wanted to have a conversation, the way I would actually do it is if I took that first, so this is the first question. If I did something like, and this, it's important why we're going through this detail here. Take my word for it. Let's see. I'm looking for the out.txt. The way a conversation works in ChatGPT is it literally, every time you ask a question and you get an answer, when you ask another question, it sends the whole conversation back. The back end is set up just to answer one question at a time, kind of. So the one question you get if you're in a conversation is just what I did here. I copied and pasted, and I'm going to save this to a new file name. Silk Road conversation, maybe. If you want to have a conversation, you have to keep sending the whole conversation back. Kind of like I did here. Here's me asking a question. Here's the chatbot's answer. And then I can put a new question down here, kind of like I did with monetary. Okay, so now this is a conversation where there's me, the chatbot, and then there's me again. And I'm going to actually put a hint for the GPT to say, you know, here's the whole conversation so far. This is the part where you might fill out the rest of the conversation to take the next turn in the conversation, right? So let's see what happens when we do this. And if I were going a little bit more slowly, I might have better file names than out 2 and out 3, because I'm going to get confused about which out is the right one to use. While we're doing that, that thing where it prints word by word what's going on in its head is called streaming. So let's put that on a roadmap as a nice to have. Let's put another thing. Maybe we hate the terminal interface. I think we shouldn't, but maybe we hate the interface. Let's put another roadmap wish, the interface instead of terminal. But the big thing that we need to do the next step on is create a conversation mode. Because this, as you can tell, this is pretty crazy, this juggling a bunch of text files and copying and pasting the conversation together. So now I know I'm juggling a bunch of monetary here. The monetary output is here. So this is the answer without any context about the Silk Road. Oops. I hope I didn't screw up. That's a good example. I wasn't being thoughtful enough because I'm talking at the same time. So this just told Salamander to overwrite our old out2. I was trying to do this, but I wasn't fast enough. So anyway, this is just that monetary. Tell me about monetary exchange and banking without being in the conversation, and this is its turn in that conversation. So you can see it still understands that it's talking about the Silk Road, and maybe it talks about evolution of monetary systems because the Silk Road is a historical thing. So this is an example of a turn in a conversation rather than a whole new, question. So the thing to know here, kind of remember, is that ChatGPT's or GPT, any AI, the back end of it is got the attention span of a goldfish. It just remembers one thing at a time. If you give it a conversation, it can say, okay, this is the thing that I need to keep going on. Um, uh, if you remember, the operative word here is words, complete things. You give it a prompt and then it completes, or you give it the start of something and then it completes it. So that's the whole thing it does. It doesn't do a conversation. Okay, so let's look at our roadmap. It would be nice to figure out how to make it have a conversation. It would be nice to see that streaming thing, although that's kind of a nice to have, not a gotta have. It might be nice to have a GUI interface instead of terminal. It turns out that you can do a GUI interface with Python, and the GUI interface is where it's got windows and some buttons, a few buttons, any interface. A GUI interface is when you have windows and buttons, and you can move your mouse and copy and paste with your mouse and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to continue to, I've been advocating, I'm going to continue to advocate that the terminal interface is a good thing to get used to because it unlocks other things that people are doing in AI. A very simple example is if you want to play with local LLMs, there's this thing called Llama which is compared to anything else, it is super easy to run a local LLM. You download one file and you run it and you're good to go. And that's super simple compared to like a lot of the LLM things. It's like, okay, well, go to Hugging Face, pick your favorite model, install Python, install CUDA, install blah, blah, blah. It has this like, like a whole days of trying to get to where you're going, and you'll probably get lost on the way. Llama is different. It's one thing, you download it, you're good to go, except right here, it's like open your computer terminal. It's like, oh yeah, of course I know how to do terminal. I mean, many people don't, right? You using Windows or Mac, you don't use the terminal much until you learn how to use the terminal, and then you can do stuff like this that unlocks new powers that you have. So that wasn't a very good sales pitch for using the terminal, but trust me, knowing how to use the terminal on your computer is an easy thing to learn, about just a tiny bit harder than learning the first three things in Markdown. And then you're able to do a lot more stuff. So back to our product roadmap. This is one I would deprecate. I wouldn't suggest that we do that. The other thing is getting a graphic user interface set up and continuing to work is non-trivial. Actually, that reminds me, I could say a more graphical interface. And that might be a GUI, or it might be a web front end. Web front ends aren't really easier the first time to set up, but it's useful for a lot of things, and it uses HTML coding and stuff like that. Let me show you. So Python does have GUI interfaces. They're a little bit tricky to set up and maintain and stuff like that. A different way to do it is what Llama did. They said, well, people really like a GUI interface instead of the thing that I was just doing, juggling a bunch of text files. That's crazy. So let me run Llama. This is the terminal part of it. You download it. You have to type that one thing and hit return, and then hope that it's not destroying my computer while it's typing a bunch of inscrutable stuff. But then it prints this, and you don't even know how to grab this from the terminal. The instructions would have told you. So this is a web front end. So thankfully, we're back in a land where we kind of know what things look like. This is a web page. It's got, text boxes instead of Pete's juggling text files. It's got these cool sliders and stuff. It's got disclosure things. So we could actually set up an interface kind of like this. We wouldn't need the same components of it, but we could set this up by leveraging our knowledge of HTML and not have to learn a whole new GUI toolkit. Okay, so where I'm kind of going, and then streaming is nice, but not super important in the grand scheme of things. Let me recap real quickly the conversation or the reason. So here's the discussion that I had about why we would or wouldn't write something like this. And I kind of lost the thread a little bit there. We were going from, anyway, I forget. I lost track of stuff. I remember. The reason to write our own is because we were interested in cheap wholesale access to LLMs. So ChatGPT Plus costs $20 a month. Doing it the way Salamander is. I'm still on Salamander, yeah. The way that Salamander is working, that probably cost me maybe 1.5 cents or something like that, like 1 cent, 2 cents, something like that. You can use an LLM a lot for pretty cheap if you have a front end.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, RJ.
So I'm trying to understand why a provider of LLMs would allow somebody to open up an account, get an API, and then only spend like pennies.
Yep.
Is there like a setup cost, initial setup cost, or a minimum? Because otherwise everybody would be doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way to think of it is API access to an LLM is like wholesale. So if it's kind of funny, you could kind of use the example of Costco, but then that kind of confuses things because Costco is not actually a wholesale. It's a kind of a retail front end that's quasi wholesale. But imagine you were in the market for food, and instead of going into a supermarket, you figured out how to get wholesale access to the food. So you can get food cheaper by wholesale, but you would have to do things like it's not a nice shopping environment. Maybe you have to come with a big truck and order a minimum amount. Maybe, you have to figure out how to work the loading dock because they don't have, that's the interface that they have for wholesale pricing. Any kind of wholesale thing comes with the need to accept more responsibility for what's going on, right? So we saw some of that. Even things like looking for this. Going here because this was super easy to check completions. Anyway, this is a good example of kind of a wholesale thing. You have to know that you don't want the old deprecated one. You need the new chat completion instead of completion. You have to figure out, oh, here it is here. You have to go, and the instructions were right there, but they're kind of hidden, right? They're not friendly or easy or anything like this. Here are all the different models that all their different endpoints can use. I happen to know, or we learned or figured out that this is the only one that we care about right now. So then here's the list of models that we can use, and then we have to go look over here for which model to use. And it's like, geez, guys, don't you just have a GPT-4? Oh, here it is. Thank goodness. So the funny thing is, if you use just the short name GPT-4, it points to GPT-4 0613. This is like frickin' 9 months old. So if you just ask for GPT-4 without thinking about it, you get a 8-month-old snapshot, and you don't get this turbo blah blah blah. So turns out this is what you want, but I had to go in and figure that out. So this is kind of similar to like oh, you can have this wholesale interface to buy groceries. All you need to do is pull up to the dock, and then you pull up to the dock, and your minivan, the lid, the trunk doesn't open because you're too close to the thing, and then the loading dock is way high because it's used, and it's like, oh, screw it, I'm gonna go like buy groceries at the retail price. I got super excited about that metaphor. Maybe explained it too long, but
Is there a
the
membership fee? Is there a member? I see what I'm just trying to
that's a
understand.
great question.
Like,
At Costco, there is a membership fee. You're totally right. Costco is quasi wholesale. It's not. With the LLMs, no, there's not a membership fee. You
so I
sign up.
can get it.
You,
Can
you
I
sign
get
up for
an
an API
account?
key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can I get an account with OpenAI to get an API access, so I don't have to pay the $20 a month, and I can only pay pennies based on my usage? What's
What's the
what are
catch?
they what are
Or
they
why
gonna
is it good for
do?
them?
Yeah, are they gonna say, well, you have to have a minimum amount of token spend of like $150 a year, or you have to pay an account fee of $150 a year just to get the API key, and then we charge you based on the tokens? I'm just trying to understand what's the cost to get an API account with OpenAI? You have one,
Uh,
right? You have
yeah,
one?
yeah.
So could you
Anybody?
just say what the cost is to get an account and not even get access?
Yep,
I
$0.
actually set an upper limit for so it doesn't cost anything to sign up and get your own, to do the back end one. What I did do when I signed up is I gave it an upper limit for if I'm approaching a certain amount of uses, don't, basically deny it if it goes above $20, because I wanted to try it before I was able to sign up for GPT Plus. So I never made it even out of the dollar, just
Yeah.
because I was playing around with it. So you can actually set an upper limit and say, I don't want to go beyond $5 or $10. And that's one of the benefits of using this format instead of using the $20 a month format.
Okay, great. So with the Costco analogy, so this is like having access to a Costco, but there's no membership fee, basically.
So if you think about it, Costco is pretty retail, right? They do have like minimum size, like you have to buy like the big size of ketchup, and you have to buy 2 of the big size of ketchup, or you have to buy a whole flat of soda or something like that. So they have kind of a weird, it's not really wholesale. And wholesale food is maybe not or actually maybe it is a great example, because wholesale food has those kind of limits, or wholesale package shipping. Like if you go to UPS and say, I want wholesale rates, and so it's like, okay, well, I can only accept 100 packages at a time, at least 100, because this is computers, there's no upfront fee, there's no monthly minimum, there's no monthly, there's nothing, there's no membership fee, nothing. There's no minimum amount you can use it. There's actually not really a maximum amount either. They would let you use $1 million or $1,000. Um, but like Naomi said, you can go in here and say, I've got this set high because this is a company account. But you can say, I only want to spend, I could set this to $8 a month, and send me an email if I ever get as high as $6. So there's no catch. It's just
How about with other, like you also have this with Midjourney?
Midjourney does not have API access, which is super frustrating because
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
I would much rather have their, even if the wholesale rate was kind of the same. Right now, I'm up to 15,000 images or whatever. I'm literally copying and pasting them because I'm scared that if I used some kind of automation, they would cut me off. Turns out I think that's not true. But anyway, Midjourney didn't do that. They're interested. Midjourney's got this thing where it looks like they're trying to make a network of people working together to make images and stuff like that. Jeannie?
So what, can I ask also what
Or,
other,
or actually a different example. Anthropic is the same thing, right? Or any of the big LLMs. I don't think there's going to be, especially because and API access can have that kind of those a monthly fee or upfront cost or something like that. Sending me emails, for instance, if you want to send emails programmatically, you do the same thing. You go to an email vendor and you sign up for an API key. Some of those people will have things like minimum amount or to you'll have to like start off with I can only send 50 emails every day because they don't want some spammer coming in and sending a million messages, in an hour and then leaving. So they you have to graduate up in levels, of trust basically before they let you use it. The LLMs they don't need any of those kind of gates, and so Anthropic I think will be pretty much the same thing, or even Gemini I think, or whatever. Um,
so if
uh,
you don't use this at all very much, basically these OpenAI is losing money on you because they have to have a billing fees that they have to, billing costs and things like that to bill you. And so they're basically probably
yeah,
losing money on this.
they're not. The
If you're a low user, if you're a low
No,
user.
no. Because there's a magical thing about software and computers and stuff like that. Once you do it, and if you do it the right way, once you do it once, it doesn't matter how many there are, right? So once they figured out how to do billing, um, it doesn't matter if I use $0 a month or $1,000 a month. It costs the same amount. The incremental cost is the same. So they're not losing money. And a thing to remember is, even though we think of, this is ChatGPT and it's ChatGPT plus $20 a month, their real business is in writing the engine, the model, the brain, and making that better and better, and having lots of people use it. And the way to have lots of people use it is to present a friendly front end, but then have the back end that anybody can use and make their other front ends. So they get a lot more API usage by showing people what could be done and then letting a bunch of other people do amazing and wonderful things based on their wholesale product. Their wholesale product is actually their real product that they care about. Real quickly, a trivia thing. Your point is well taken that billing takes a while to, it's a cost that they had to incur to be able to do it well. In the early days, they didn't actually do billing very well. They had a hack together back end, you could just tell. And they would go like months. I had a friend who literally wanted to get billed by OpenAI, $1 or $2 a month or something like that. But they couldn't get themselves organized to even bill him. They didn't care. So they did skimp, or they did delay their work on the billing back end, and they didn't really lose money, but they lost my friend as a customer because he couldn't get them to there was a early thing you can get GPT-4 access if you've ever been billed like $1, and he's like, I want GPT-4 access. I've used it enough, but I've never been billed. So that was the friction that they had, and the friction they accepted. But anymore, they're doing great. I'm gonna walk away from my desk, but I'm still gonna be on the phone.
Okay,
My
Jeannie
dog
has a
needs to get
question, I
looked at.
think.
Yes, and that was what I was, Jeannie, go ahead.
Yes, I can wait, but this is all good conversation. So if you can still hear me, that's great.
Yeah, I can.
Good. My question is, with the ChatGPT Plus, is that access to dynamic information as opposed to using your own front end? Is that access to static information?
They're actually the same. So if you use ChatGPT Plus, the $20 a month thing, or if you use your own front end and the wholesale API key access, same information, same up to date.
Okay.
Dynamic is not quite the way I would say it, because the current GPT-4 model is trained up to December 2023.
That date
But
flashed across the screen, and I'm like, wait, what? December 2023? Jeez.
that's pretty up to date. It's a lot more up to date than they've gotten better at keeping it up to date. And you access the same backend either way, in the retail mode or the wholesale mode. There is a little bit of difference though. If you think about ChatGPT Plus, not only will it chat for you, but it'll also make pictures with DALL-E. It will describe pictures, describe images if you upload images. So that all comes like built into ChatGPT Plus. To do that by the wholesale way, each of those is a separate function that you would call. And that's not hard, but it's not built in. So there is, well, I don't know if that's it's just another thing. Like
So it takes
figuring out
more
how to get your
practice.
minivan to do. It takes a little bit more work, but then you get a lot more flexibility too. And a good example of that is I've got another Python script that I wrote pretty quick with ChatGPT 4 that does image vision. So, RJ?
Joy is asking a question in chat. Would there be a cap limit with your own front end? And I know you just showed that you can set one up yourself so that it doesn't go up beyond a certain limit. But I guess Joy's asking if OpenAI would set a limit on you if you have
No,
your own front end. No,
no.
they want as much business as they can get.
Yeah. The slightly longer answer is, somewhere like 1 million or 1 billion or something like that. At some point, there's going to be a limit, but it's bigger than, it's kind of like a wholesale grocer, would run out of food if you bought like 5 supermarkets worth or 10 supermarkets worth, but practically there's no limit. Okay, so let's kind of recap here. Our big next step would be to create a conversation mode, and the way I demoed that, I kind of made a hint of how we would do conversation mode. Let me make sure these are. What I did to fake a conversation mode was I added me and chatbot as things in this conversation. So there's me, and then my question, and chatbot, and then the answer. And then this is, yeah. This is the conversation version. So me, colon, chatbot, colon, me, colon, chatbot, colon. And this seemed to work. The answer was good. We could fit it in here. So all we need to do, quote unquote, all we need to do is set it up so that when it writes the output file, it writes the input, me, colon, and then the input, and then chatbot, colon, and the output. And write that as the output instead of just the answer, if that makes sense. So we have a, I know if I were on a whiteboard, I would have drawn some boxes and we could see a little bit more what I was talking about, but we've got a model for setting up a conversation here that would work. And there's a reason that it's kind of important that this test worked. And you'll notice that I said chatbot, not ChatGPT. I'm interested in getting this to work with Salamander, to work with Anthropic and whatever else. So, you know, instead of putting ChatGPT here, I don't want to have to switch this every time. So if we just say chatbot, it looks like GPT-4 knows what we're talking about. So then this is kind of important because there's a native conversation mode that is in this API endpoint. And what you're supposed to do, let's see if this looks right. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to say, you know, let's see, right about here, I guess. Hey, chat completions endpoint, I'm going to give you a set of messages. And the set of messages is going to be user assistant, user assistant, user assistant. And you're supposed to put these, you're supposed to tell it not, so this is the text of the message here. And you're supposed to tell it, the user said this, and then the chatbot said this, and then the user said this. So, well, so you can see that this is kind of turned into programmer gobbledygook all of a sudden. It's got these, you know, it's got this like cruft here. That's a technical term, cruft. It's got this junk here in front of our messages, right? And this is a lot harder to read for a civilian than me, and this is a lot harder for a civilian to read than chatbot. So so my idea is to continue working in that user-friendly chat style with just me and chatbot instead of this programmer-friendly model. This is called JSON. This format, data format, is called JSON. And a historical note: the previous version of Salamander is called Sylph, something I wrote a long time ago, and haven't really done anything with. Sylph is set up to use this programmer-friendly way instead of the more user-friendly way with me and colon and chatbot colon. So, so I think where we would go next, where I would go next, is setting up that conversation mode. A different place to go would be to set up a web front end or a full-blown GUI. You know, setting up the web front end might actually be a good kind of compromise. Maybe that would be a way that we would use Salamander and have it be a little bit more friendly interfaced. I actually like that idea a lot. Okay. Noemi asks, can you have an LLM locally, a copy of one? Yes. The most, like the fanciest LLMs right now are GPT-4 and Claude 3 Opus. You can't have one of those on your computer. But about at the level of ChatGPT 3.5, you can have your choice actually. And we did that quick demo with LlamaFile, but it's funny, I could just redo this instead of looking up in the command history. Anyway, there's tons of them, hundreds if not thousands. Most of them are hard to set up. Some of them are easy to set up. LlamaFile, you download one thing, you have to follow these short instructions. They're a little bit inscrutable, but you follow those instructions and figure out how to kind of do this every time. And then this is a language model that's running all on my computer, and I could pull the Ethernet cord or turn off the Wi-Fi, and this would still work exactly the same way because it's all on my computer and it's using my computer for all the processing. And unlike the wholesale version, this one is completely free because it's software I'm running on my computer.
But the catch is you got to have a computer that's powerful enough to handle it and hopefully has a GPU that's pretty powerful too.
Yeah, they've done a lot of work on making LLMs run on older and less powerful computers. So I think an LLM like this would run pretty well on any computer that you've got. It gets a little bit more tricky with local image generators. So this is a local image generator that I used to be pretty good at, and I suck at it now. But this, I wonder. This is actually pretty easy to use as image generators go, but there's a fair amount of stuff that you have to like set the right way and stuff. This one is free actually. The LlamaFile is free. It's open source. This one is not open source, but it's free. And
If it
works
has
pretty
an
well.
image generator in it too, that means it's got two language model. It's got a language model plus a diffusion model.
So I'm showing two things, or I just showed two things. One of them was LlamaFile, which is this. And then this is called Draw Things. It's a front end for stable diffusion, and then it manages the back end, downloading the right models and stuff like that. And you can download a ton of different models. You have to figure out what models you want and which ones you don't. So you're right, RJ. This has got a lot of an image generator has a bunch of stuff. It has some language understanding. It has LoRa. It has ControlNet, ways to do inpainting, and then it has post-processing stuff like the upscalers and the samplers and all that kind of stuff. So the good news is, well, one kind of good news is Draw Things, the guy who wrote this app, figured out how to like package all that stuff up, and he lets you have access to it, but you don't. Once you get these settings, you can kind of just leave it. You can fiddle with them as much as you want, but you can kind of just leave it. But there is a whole like 6 different pipeline steps under the hood that take care of different parts of generating an image, like converting. Well, I don't know. Image generators actually, they're not really language. I guess that it's a language model that's trained with the with the image mode. So it thinks of images in language terms.
So that's separate then from a diffusion model.
I think that a diffusion model and the ability to understand language are kind of like the same part. Um, the and the diffusion model is just one way that you get an LLM that can create an image, right? But when it's thinking of an image, diffusion model takes a white noise and progressively turns it into more and more representation of an image. The image that it's looking for, it's based on its training with language. So it doesn't really understand the language. It just maps the way the certain strings feel or smell or something like that. It knows that there's images that go along with those. It's kind of like it knows how to do translation from one language to another language. It's just that the other language is an image, not French or Spanish or something. I don't know if that made sense, but
Thank you.
I have a question before you get too far away.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
Okay, thank you. When running a local LLM,
Yes.
you can disconnect it from the internet and never call the data center for an update. So, but is there a point when you can call? So you're running locally with your API key, let you run local. 6 months from now, you want more information from the internet. OpenAI has updated, hopefully. Do you just plug into the internet and it automatically calls for an update?
Let's try to answer that with like Llama maybe or other local LLMs. But if I may, Jeannie, I can show that kind of question better with the image thing. So if you imagine an image thing and a text thing are kind of the same, except this one does images. The answer to your question is SDXL is kind of the GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 maybe of images. And you'll see, so SDXL is an improvement on, I wonder if there's stable diffusion in here someplace. Here it is here. This is actually a good example. So in the olden days, there was a thing called Stable Diffusion 1.4, and then there was a newer one called 1.5, which was better in some ways and worse in some ways. And then there was a newer thing than that called, oh my gosh, SDXL. And then, they got the base version done, and then there was Turbo. The guy who maintains Draw Things watches all of these things happen on Hugging Face or whatever. And every 2 weeks or month or something like that, he's like, wow, Stable Diffusion has bumped up to version 1.5. He does the work for this program, Draw Things. He does the work of making it so that all you have to do is click on, you click on 1.4 or you click on 1.5, and then if it's not downloaded, it'll go out and automatically download it and stuff like that. It wouldn't download. I can switch these and it won't download until I say generate, I think. But he does all the work of keeping that up to date. With something that's not quite as fancy, I guess. Even with Salamander here. So we're kind of already in that situation. We had to pick a model, and I just told ChatGPT I want to use a certain model, and it just wrote the whole thing that way. But in here, there's an in here is the name of the model that it wants to use. So the answer to your question is Salamander's not going to keep track of that for me automatically. But if all I have to do is go to, I have to figure out which page this is, but it's helpfully called model updates. Um, here's all the different versions they've got. And OpenAI, different companies have different ways of naming things, but what they do is they use a month and a day for their version number, kind of. So this one is from June 13th, 2023. Here is November 6th. Here is January 25th. And then they did something interesting here. Because they keep adding new versions, you can pick a nickname, which is for Turbo Preview. And the idea of this is if I set the name to this, sooner or later they're going to switch to GPT-4, O3, whatever, or O4, whatever. They're going to have a new version of this one. But if I pick this name, I don't have to worry about it. It's going to be the latest one, not the specific one.
Yeah, because it says in the next column that is pointing to the latest one. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, so we would have to, either we would have to check this page once in a while, or we'd read in the news, there's a new version of, they went from 0125 to, a new one. Then we would go into our code and just switch it. There's a subtlety here. We could actually, I'm pretty sure that there's an API call that gives you a list of the models. So we could add some code here that checks either every time or maybe once in a while. You could say, hey, check for updates. And it would print a list of the current models. And that would be another, we could actually automate that if we wanted to.
Perfect. Thank you.
So where do we get to in chat? GitHub and Hugging Face. So the deal with Hugging Face is it sounds like it's important, but it's a couple steps, maybe more than a couple steps. It's a much deeper topic to be going to Hugging Face and looking at models. And it matters, Hugging Face mostly matters either for AI developers, people who are making stuff, making models and new ways to fine tune models and all that kind of stuff. People are actually doing the guts of AI. Or it also matters if you're using a local thing like Llama-File or Stable Diffusion. Even then, if I'm using Stable Diffusion, I don't need to go to Hugging Face as long as I trust that this list is fairly up to date. So kind of what happens, there's a Discord for Draw Things, which is, let's see how good my image recognition is. It's crappy. Here it is here. So if you're this is a little bit more on the bleeding edge kind of, well, I don't know. If you're using a local thing, you are more on the bleeding edge, I guess is a way to say it. So then you can just kind of use this and not worry about it. But what's happens is, as we know, somebody puts out a new model and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to try it. I heard about it on Twitter and it's the coolest thing, and they even gave me a Hugging Face link and blah blah blah. So the way most people do that even is you go to here and you go to feedback or questions or general chat or announcements, and you go, when are you going to integrate, this new thing I heard on Hugging Face? You don't even go to Hugging Face. You just know that Hugging Face is there. Maybe you went to the page, the model page or whatever. You go look for the model here, and somebody else who knows more about this stuff is going to be talking about that model and when it's going to be available. And so kind of ignore Hugging Face. You don't need Hugging Face until you know that you need Hugging Face. GitHub is a little bit of a different thing. GitHub is actually useful in lots of ways. GitHub is used for many different things, and civilians I teach people to use GitHub for their Obsidian backups and their Obsidian collaborations. And even then, when I'm showing that, the whole interface with GitHub is set up for developers, set up for programmers who are using it literally 8 hours a day or whatever. It is super confusing. It's got all kinds of stuff going on, and there's very little that you actually need. So when I show people GitHub, normal people who aren't developers, it's like, here's where you can do one thing. Here's where you can do another thing. Here's the last thing you have to do. Okay, you're done. But GitHub is intimidating to use. It's not intimidating to do specific things. It's funny, that's the wrong thing to click. Here's the website actually. Here's the website in GitHub. The AI 101 website. So if you want to look at, so this is more typical a way to use GitHub. And if I made a big mistake and I wanted to look at a previous version of something, I could go to the version names that I've got here. Oh, here's where I added the notes, fix some links. What changes did I make when I fixed some links? I added a chap link. I put angle brackets around this for other reasons. I also added a few other things. So this is a good and fairly easy use of GitHub to go to a project that you know and do particular things like look at the versions, add a bug. That's kind of the main thing to do. The main thing that civilians would need to do with GitHub, and it's not too hard. Okay. Yeah, Tom says that maybe an advantage of using terminal and code. You can specify exactly which model you want. That's kind of a bug and a feature. It's kind of like a pain to have to know that you need to go look up which one. But then it's a feature. Like if you know that 0613 was awesome and you like the way it answers questions, you can use it easily. Kind of the same thing happens in Midjourney. Like there are people who still use version 5, even though version 6 is better in most ways. They like some of the ways that version 5. So that's a case where Midjourney doesn't have an API, but they will let you specify the model. That specify the model thing is not super, it's related more to alternative front end than terminal specifically. Yesterday we looked at a little bit at an alternative front end that somebody built so that we wouldn't have to maybe if we wanted to do that. I think there's still reasons to build our own. But this one, this is a Mac one, and I can, he's done an interesting thing. The developer of this thing kind of tried to cut down the noise to the ones that were most important rather than the very specific each different one. So he's cleaned up the name a little bit and shortened the list. So the alternative front end is what gives you the ability to pick a model, kind of. Okay, what should we do with 12 or 13 more minutes?
So what's the next, what's the next step though? You built this, can you share that with people and people copy it and somehow run it themselves and then be able to access OpenAI using an API key if they set up an account with OpenAI?
Yes, we could do that, and maybe that's a good way to wrap up. If y'all don't mind not doing Midjourney. Yeah, Coda GUI, that's a good one. We could actually do, well, super distractible all the time. So we could actually do maybe a web front end. It would take 20 minutes, but yeah, the short answer is yes. And let's go through that process. Actually, it involves GitHub a little bit. This is not quite where I would release it, but it does actually work. It's actually an incremental, version 1. Um, so so the way to do what RJ asked, how could we publish this and people could use it even the way it is? I'd be a little bit embarrassed. I'm a little bit embarrassed that you have to do this input file, output file thing. I want to get us past that soon, and especially do the conversation mode. That's going to be an interesting one because we have that mix of, do we want to do it in a friendly way for people, or do we want to do it the programmer friendly way with JSON data? We'll see. But anyway, we could publish this version and people could use it right now. So the way that we would do that is we would make this open source. Just decide that it's going to be open source instead of secret. And then we could put it in GitHub. A thing to know, GitHub is called a Git forge. So there's two separate things involved in a great question, by the way, would be what's the, and I'm not even going to let it get to the answer, between Git and GitHub. Ask that question someday. Git is kind of like a protocol, and GitHub is it's like hugging face. It's a funny thing to say. GitHub is a place where people swap open source code, and sometimes the coolest thing with open source is not only can you get the version that the author wrote, but you can get the version, make your changes, or other people can make changes, and you can get lots of version iteration, innovation, new stuff. So
Hey,
what we want to
I
do,
was going to
yes.
ask you, sorry, one small question. So how do you compare GitHub and GitLab?
Oh, I was going there, Patsy. Thanks for pulling me back.
Sorry.
GitHub is no, I really did want to go there. GitHub is called a Git forge. They call them different things, but Git forge is probably you could ask ChatGPT what's a Git forge, but if I do that, also referred to as software control, no, something control management provider, something like that.
Companies will pick up like a term that they want to sort of like market by that doesn't necessarily match what everyone else is thinking. So I get that also.
Well, these are both, Gitforge is a generic term and SCM provider is a generic term for
Okay.
hubs that manage open source stuff. So there's GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and the big open one is called, I'm going to do this a backwards way and do that. Codeberg. I could copy this to notes. I'm just going to put this here. GitHub is the original 800-pound gorilla version. GitLab was originally kind of an open source version of GitHub, and they did a open source commercial mixed thing where they've got a service that they run for pay, and then they have an open source version of their system which you can self-host. Bitbucket is from Atlassian, the people who make whatever Atlassian makes.
Jira and Trello and other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Codeberg is a completely open source and free thing. So if you're an open source enthusiast, if you're dyed in the wall open source, you actually, GitHub used to be the cool place for all the cool kids, kind of, and then Microsoft bought them recently, and Microsoft is pretending that they don't like do anything with GitHub, but they kind of do. Um, some of us worry that Microsoft is trying to capture all of open source, and buying GitHub was actually a way that they put their arms around open source, and it's either a friendly hug or it's a big scary bear hug. We don't know. They're doing a bunch of that in lots of different places. They're buying up chunks of the open source. There's another thing called npm, which is where you swap Node JavaScript libraries. They bought that. They're buying this, they're buying that, they're buying this. They're deprecating. GitHub had this wonderful code editor. Microsoft said, well, or GitHub owned by Microsoft said, well, we don't want to maintain that one anymore. We're gonna let it go. We'll switch to maintaining this open source Microsoft version. There's a bunch of stuff that's going on with GitHub that's kind of scary. So that chases people over to GitLab sometimes. GitLab is kind of confusing and even harder to use than GitHub. Codeberg is the new place that you go if you are an open source patriot, is maybe a way to say it. Bitbucket is fine. It works okay. It's never been super big. If you're in the Atlassian ecosystem, you'd probably use Bitbucket more than other things. But so then these are the big services. There are little similar things that you can run by yourself. There's Git and Gitorious. Forgeo. There's software that you can run that makes your own little version of GitHub. So if you want to do a small company and you don't want to deal with GitHub, reasons to not deal with GitHub is because maybe it's not as private as you want. You have super private source code that you want to maintain. You don't necessarily have to go up to the big services to get it. You can run Git locally, or in the cloud for your company or whatever. I'm forgetting I'm forgetting one cool one, but anyway. So let's in 5 minutes publish Salamander. So a thing that I've already done, let me make this text a little bit bigger. These are all the files that we have in here. I've already set up what's called a license file. I copied this from Sylph actually. So when you're making open source, it's really good to use a particular license. This is an MIT license, it's called. It's good to put a license file. Well, anyway, licenses. So I'm partway here to making this open source. I've decided to copyright it, and I'm going to own it. And maybe I'll update the. It's actually very important that even an open source thing has an owner. But as an owner, I give you a bunch of permission to do stuff, and that's what makes it open source. And then I got some cover my rear text in here. This is all boilerplate called the MIT license. And some other day we'll talk about how to choose a license. There's a dozen of them. So another thing that we need to do is make a README file. We're going to do this super quick and dirty. Because we're running out of time. So I'm going to keep this README file super simple. This is deficient. I would not normally publish it without a little bit more how to use it, what it is stuff. But so there's different ways to do this, but what I want to do is and different orders to do them. I might have actually set up the repo before. A repo is short for repository. That's what you call an open source chunk package. I might have set up the repo first and then made the code, but I've got code and I need to do it a little bit in the other way. So GitHub is super hard to use, kind of, and someday we'll talk about better ways to do it. But I know if I click plus, I can say new repository. I don't need a template. I can pick different owners. These are all organizations and projects I'm part of. So I'm going to own it personally. I'm going to call it Salamander. Salamander is not something I'm used. I'm sure there's another repo called Salamander, but there's not a repo called Peter Kaminsky / Salamander. If I were good.
You have to change the date to 2024.
Is there a, I think I did already. In the
I'm
license.
looking up there above and it says 2023, what you were just showing us. So, okay, now I see
I
it.
switched it. Yeah. License, by the way, it's not strictly required. It's just super helpful if you have open source software with a license. And lots of good reasons for that. But okay, so here's Salamander. I can pick to make it public or private. GitHub actually GitHub still has the ability to have private repos that are in the free tier. I think some, well, anyway. So that's important. It's important that I can keep like private Obsidian vaults in here. I could have had it create a blank README file for it, but I'm not going to do that. I guess what I'm doing a weird thing here. Add git ignore, I already have one of those. Here I'm going to say that this helps its search engine know that I'm using an MIT license, and GitHub will help you find that boilerplate for the MIT license. Okay, so create a repo. Now anybody can, actually it looks like it provided me a license file, great. I was also hoping it would help me here. I'm used to creating a repo and then it gives you a set of steps to things to do next. Let me redo that. Let's delete this and try again. Yeah, great, thanks. So I'm doing something dangerous. So it's like, are you really Pete? And yes, I really am. Let's try that one more time. New repository, Salamander. Oops, that's not it. I'm going to leave license none and come back later and fix that maybe. And this is what I was trying to get to. Quick setup. This is, well, there's a couple different options here depending on whether I already have something or not. And I'm in this here. So let me copy this and then paste that over here. I had set it up with Git already, so then I could just do the connect. All of this just connects my local repo to my local repo to GitHub's repo, and then I can say git status, git. Thanks Llama for dropping random crap in my thing. I'm going to say git add readme. So that's one of the files that I want to keep track of. Git status. So I made a change in license, and one of the beauties of Git is that you can say what's the difference between it, and red is deleted, green is added. So I changed the thing, so I can say git add license too. Okay, so how are we doing? I guess I already did a previous commit with this. Anyway, so now git status one more time, git commit -m ready for publishing. I'm going to add a snarky comment here. And now I can say git push. Push is the way you sync with the cloud. Push moves code up to the cloud, up to GitHub or your other Git forge. Pull is how you get it back. So if somebody else working on this project made a change, I would do git pull. So now if I refresh this, we'll see that all the code is up here. And here's the code here. And now since I made this public, this won't necessarily make a bunch of sense, but if you know how to use, even if you don't know how to use GitHub, the civilians I've taught GitHub, they would go, oh, I know what to do. I go to this link, I click this, and there's different ways to connect it. If you want a local repo that keeps being updated from the cloud version, you'd use one of these here. And you could also just download a zip if you don't want to continue to work with, collaborate with the thing. So now the thing that's really missing here is even a tiny bit of instructions on how to set this up and how to use it. But I'll probably do that offline. But you can go ahead and download this and use it. And a help for that would be to use the SILF instructions, which are probably pretty close. So this is how you install it, clone this repository, install requests, activate a Python virtual environment first. This is missing from these instructions, but this is kind of important. And then this is how to set up the OpenAI key. And so then the instructions down to about here. This is where Salamander has different instructions. This is how you use the SILF. Instead of text files, you use this ever so easy JSON structure to go back and forth. So this is what I wanted to avoid with Salamander. It would be nice to kind of replace this with that me chatbot thing. And that would be the next step. So there you go.
Oh, you did it. Thank you. Yay.
Yay. Thanks for y'all's attention. I know we covered a lot of stuff at some depth, but we're on our way. We have an alternate LLM front end that's pretty broken or needs a lot of work. Not a lot of hard work, I think.
So with this, if somebody wants to, they could maybe eventually get access to OpenAI and all their different models using API access. And will they be able to generate images this way too? Without a GUI front end, it'll generate images?
The short answer is, well, the short answer is either yes or no. The short friendly answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is overview introduction. where we are right now is we're doing text generation, and we're using the chat completions API. So we would have to use a different endpoint. We'd be still using the same API key and the same general structure, but instead of this chat completions, we would be using, to image generation, we would be using images generate, or oh, interestingly enough, you use the chat completions thing to recognize images. You just send it an image instead of text. But anyway, we would use this this endpoint to generate images, and we totally could. Another question is whether we would build that into Salamander, or if we would have, you know, a different thing. Or both. That might be a fun thing to do next, is to make an image thing. But we should do the conversation thing next.
Yeah, that would be good. So then people in the salon can use this to save a lot of money, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great idea, RJ. And you know, the another thing that you could do is you can automate image generation. So we could have a thing that, you know, that does the Kaminsky method, random prompts. You could automate that and get, you know, 10 images or 50 images or whatever you want made for, you know, not much money. It's a good idea. Good point. Thanks. I'll try to set up the next sessions a little bit more early in the week. Not, well, the sessions might end up towards the end of the week, but I'll try to announce them earlier, like even tomorrow maybe.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all. Take care.
So
Take
much.
care.
Have a
Thanks.
good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Have a good day.